This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Hello and welcome to Research Talks here on Stockbox with Alan Green, with what, for Stockbox anyway, has been a slightly quieter week. I know I was travelling to London for an IPO with Neo Energy Metals, which is one of the companies we'll be covering today in the Research Talks. But generally on interview front, it's not been so busy this week. I don't know how it's been for you, Alan.
It has been a quieter week, Mark, in some ways, but in other ways we've had an awful lot of internal company admin to get sorted. So it's been a screen-bound week in many ways, which is just as well given the horrific weather that has been lashing the UK this week and continues to lash the UK today. I'm looking out of the window now, and it's just this sheets of rain coming down again. So there we go, fun and games.
In fun and games, indeed. Well, as I say, we're talking about Neo Energy Metals, who IPO'd yesterday and then did a placing today, I believe, 500,000. So quite a lot of money that they've got now available to them. And yeah, I think that's a good thing. I was talking to them yesterday and, talking again about how London perceives placings as negative and dilutionary, but North American, where they get mining a bit more, they get excited when companies raise money, because they raised a heck of a lot. Someone told me a company had raised 24 million to drill 6 holes. Because most of it was going into infrastructure for access. So,
yes.
I think raising money to do exploration, they need it. That's why they're on the market. It's a good thing. But you're going to tell us a little bit about that, set the investment case for Neo Energy Metals, and Vinanz as well, who I also interviewed from the exchange yesterday because they had quite significant news there. So over to you, Alan. Which one do you want to take first?
Well, let's start with Neo Energy Metals first, Mark. And yes, I mean they've raised a decent chunk of money. They've raised 4.9 million gross, and as you say, here we are talking on Friday. They've raised a further 500,000 at 1.25p this morning. So the company has an effective market capitalization of 15 million. But when you look closely at this project, you realize that actually what the team have got here is a mine that is effectively, I say mine, it's an exploration project that has been explored. It has a JORC resource estimate in place. It has multiple boreholes from previous drilling, and it's already well advanced in drilling terms. So as opposed to so many exploration companies that come to market, they're seeking that they have a project that could be good, might not be so good. This one is an absolute slam dunk. It's already en route. And strategically, it's important because the management team, or certainly the executive chairman, Jason Brewer, who of course you spoke to yesterday, Mark, or should I say his company, Marula Mining's Blesberg lithium project is less than 30 kilometers away from Neo Energy Metals project. So just a bit of detail behind the float of Neo Metals. So it's come to market with a 15 million market cap. It was formerly a cash shell called Stranger Holdings, and that cash shell completed a reverse takeover of Desert Star Trading, which is the owner of a uranium project in South Africa's Northern Cape, and this is known as the Henkries Uranium Project. As I say, less than 30 kilometers from the Blesberg lithium project, which of course Jason has developed rapidly this year and delivered some great returns for Marula shareholders. So I think there's a lot of excitement surrounding this. So uranium, it's a metal that the market falls in love with and market falls out of love with. But right now, it is looking like the only solution for clean and cheap power going forward. So what do we know about uranium? It's abundant in the earth. It's very much like rare earths in that respect. But of course, it's the concentration in one place that's key to this. And it's well known that there is going to be a real supply squeeze as we go forward. The world is turning increasingly to clean energy, and despite the issues with radioactivity and the potential danger of uranium or and depleted uranium, of course, for use in munitions. Despite this, there is a well-documented supply squeeze coming up in about 10 to 15 years' time. So it's been established that the development pipeline for uranium projects needs to at least double by that time to avoid this supply squeeze. So Neo Energy Metals Henkery's uranium project is coming to the market at a very good time. So it's we spoke about nuclear power, and of course the traditional nuclear power stations, they're big, they're cumbersome, and of course it takes so many years for the waste uranium to be processed and made safe due to the half-life of the isotopes. So we're now seeing the power station model develop. So you've got companies like BAE Systems developing smaller nuclear power stations that could, say, power a town or a county rather than supply power to half of the country. And this is going to be what we're going to see increasingly going forward. So it will mean that the demand for uranium will increase exponentially. So uranium occurs naturally in soil, for instance, at roughly constituent parts at just under 1%. Of course, you then got the enriched uranium in the U-235 isotope, which also known as depleted uranium, that takes that level to between 2 and 94% mass. And of course, it's the heavy mass of the depleted uranium that are used for munitions. Of course, with shells, for instance, if that shell hits a tank, then the depleted uranium explodes into dust, and those dust particles react with the oxygen and catch fire. So it's a very deadly weapon in that regard too. So back to Neo Energy and the Henkery's uranium project. So the project was first discovered as far back as 1975 by Anglo-American, and it covers an area of some 750 square kilometers. But it's a very low-cost project in that the uranium paleochannels are very shallow, so they're between 5 to 8 meters down. So effectively, they can be almost bulldozed out of the ground. Henkery's, by its location, also has a very good infrastructure. It has power and water on site and good roads and networks. Within you've got two sections to the Henkery's project. Henkery's North, there's uranium identified within 6 key zones, and the Henkery's South, those paleochannels extend for up to 24 kilometers. So a pre-feasibility study was completed by Anglo-American, and this followed mining of some over 200 pits. Sampling and test work was undertaken. But all this was stopped in 1979 when the uranium market collapsed due to lack of demand. But that market now is looking very different due to the drive for clean and sustainable energy. The backdrop is now completely different. There were other concerns about issues with coal power and the loss of jobs in the 70s, it was a completely different backdrop to the backdrop we face today. So what that has led to is a JORC compliant resource of 4.7 million pounds. That's the old imperial measurement of pounds of uranium. But that's a mineral resource estimate derived from less than 10% of the total license area. Some $30 million has been spent on historical exploration with the test bits and pilot plant work and a feasibility study. And the money that's been raised, which is basically $5.5 million now with the additional subscription today, will complete an updated feasibility study, and it will deliver what is expected to be a substantial increase in the mineral resource estimate. So Neo Metals will hold up to 70% of the Henkries uranium project. The other 30% is owned by a company called Wavecrest, and this interest is held in accordance with the South African Black Economic Empowerment model. So it's something that is ensuring Black empowerment in the region, and of course is going to be very important going forward. So where Henkries is now, the company's also said it is actively seeking other projects in the region too. We've already seen what Jason Brewer and the team have done, both with Marula Mining, adding additional projects, and also, of course, Shuka Minerals, which is another company founded by Jason. So it's also worth noting as well that an airborne survey that was undertaken about a year and a half ago, May 2022, identified a significant base metal anomaly at the Henkries project. So this is in addition to the uranium that's already there. And there are plans to explore the whole site for additional minerals, as well as that base metal anomaly, additional metals, including lithium, copper, graphite, lead, and zinc. So the raise that was put together by the company was cornerstoned, of course, by Q Global, which of course is Quinton van der Berg, and Quinton has been very instrumental in working with Jason to invest into his projects to help him grow the business. So having a cornerstone investor like this in the region is hugely important. And Q Global have invested $3.5 million of their own money, so that's a pretty sizable chunk of investment to actually sort of hit the ground running with. Just a note or a few comments on the board here. We've got Jason Brewer, of course, needs no introduction, certainly to Stopbox listeners. Sean Heathcote is the chief executive, and Sean has many years of experience, over 30 years of experience in the business. Sean is the chief executive. He has previously worked on numerous projects across Africa. He's worked at an operational level with Billiton, BHP Billiton, and also Anglo-American too. So, of course, has very good knowledge of this project through that work with them. Then we have Bongani Razia, who's the non-exec director. He's also a director of South African liquid petroleum gas company called Petrogas, and other companies in the region. Another non-exec, Jacqueline Muchai, she's a non-exec director. She's founder of the Gathoni Muchai Investments Group, of course, based in Kenya, of which Jason is also a key part of. And she's also the director of Mayflower Capital too, which is one of the owners of the company that or the companies that were shareholders in the Henkries uranium project, and two other non-exec directors, James Longley and Charles Tatnall. So the company's on the market now. No news of further developments yet, but of course, coming to market yesterday, you wouldn't expect that. But I think there's a lot to come. We're going to see news, as I've already mentioned, on the additional works the company will undertake, which is the updated feasibility study, a newly restated mineral resource estimate, and of course news of those other metals that are in the ground there too. So it's the company's come to the market very much at the right time, and I think when you get a major global player like Q Global coming in as your cornerstone investor, I think you have to consider that Neo Metals really are onto something.
I agree, Alan, and having spoken to Sean yesterday, he said now the hard work starts and we're not going to let the market down. We want to surprise everyone with what's to come. And he did allude to the fact that there will be a lot of news to come from now until Christmas. So, I mean, I'm quite new onto the market. Thank you very much for telling us a bit about the history of the company there. A few things I wasn't aware of. And as you say, uranium is a very hot moment, and little bit of something I heard, I won't say from who, but it was from someone yesterday when I was in London around everyone. They were talking of uranium prices being a sort of $150 per pound. I think at the moment it's around 70, somewhere between 70 and 80. So, and yeah, you can see how that's going to happen, can't you? With the demand for clean baseload energy. So I think not many uranium players on the London markets, but there's one more been added as of yesterday.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's important. So if you're considering investing in uranium, just look at the backdrop to the energy market. I mentioned BAE Systems developing these mini, if you like, mini power station hubs that will be mini nuclear power stations that can power small towns or counties. This is something I think we're going to see more and more of. You're going to see, I suppose, for want of a better term, pocket-sized nuclear power stations, and that's obviously they'll be key consumers going forward of uranium. So yeah, really exciting time and a pivotal point, I think, for the uranium exploration industry.
Indeed. Well, thank you for that, Alan. So if we move on to something completely different and talk Bitcoin, which doesn't seem to, we spoke about these kind of things a while ago, didn't we? They've gone a bit quiet. But Vinanz PLC, of course, are very bullish on the Bitcoin and the crypto space.
Yeah, they are indeed, and I think with good reason. Of course, we were talking Bitcoin and crypto, and we've looked at so many companies in the sector. Of course, we've had companies like Argo Blockchain that have blazed a trail in the past, and the share price has risen and then fallen, and looks like it's going to start rising again. But of course, the process of mining, the principle behind it, of course, is very sound through generating through Bitcoin mining. You use a tremendous amount of processing power to create Bitcoins. So the more processing power you have, the more Bitcoins you can create. And of course, if you're creating Bitcoins in a finite market, in other words, there can only be so many Bitcoins. So the more you generate, and the more you put into your wallet, then the better you're going to be longer term. So Vinanz was set up in April this year. I'll come onto the board in a second, of course, headed by David Lenegas. And the company has set out to, I think we can say it's very much the next generation of Bitcoin mining company, because of course with Bitcoin mining there are really significant costs behind setting up the Bitcoin mining facilities, and setting up the machines to crunch the data and mine the Bitcoins, and that uses an awful lot of power. And there are certain areas in the world where you can go and buy really cheap power. So what Vinanz have done, rather than actually fund and buy these facilities outright, they've invested into these miners to go and to mine the Bitcoin and utilize and take advantage of the cheap power. And certainly Vinanz have invested into facilities both in Nevada and more recently in Labrador in Canada. And Labrador in Canada takes a full advantage of green hydro energy, which is incredibly cheap. And there are other such facilities across the USA where you can literally use huge amounts of power and pay a fraction of the cost that you'd normally pay. So Vinanz was set up to develop a fully fledged Bitcoin mining company, focusing first of all on installing clusters of Bitcoin miners across these facilities through third-party crypto mining facilities. So setting up the mining teams and the functionality. So they're scaling up the Bitcoin mining teams at the moment, but the team are looking at other operations. Other cryptocurrencies are under consideration too, as are further operations both in the decentralized finance and big data arena. So this will potentially add further dimensions to Vinanz's operations going forward. So there's quite a good timeline to the development of Vinanz in following the IPO in June. the company announced it had set up 100 new Bitcoin miners operating in Labrador on a fixed price agreement, continual processing power of 10.4 petahash. So in terms of processing power, you've got a hash rate, and that's the measuring unit of the processing power of the Bitcoin network. And the hash is part of a calculation that's needed to verify a Bitcoin transaction. So you then go to the next level, which is terahash, which is thousands of hashes, which is pretty powerful. Then you get to the next multiple, which is petahash, which is that's the multiplication by 1 quadrillion, 1 and 15 noughts, which equals processing power. So 1 petahash is pretty powerful. So at this point, their processing power was 10.4 petahash, using, of course, that green energy power. So September, the company announced a dual listing in addition to its Aquis listing, where it's currently trading. It also announced a US OTC QB venture market listing, which is a common move nowadays for dual listings, and I think particularly with the exposure both to North America, both in Nevada and of course in the Labrador and Canada too, that makes an awful lot of sense, and certainly a lot of American interest in investing into Bitcoin mining companies, particularly as we do seem to be on the cusp of a second increase in the Bitcoin price. So also in September, the company announced that its Nebraska and Labrador operations had increased. They were now running at 12 petahash per second. So the Bitcoins generated in the Vinanz wallet, when it came to market, initially had 5 Bitcoin. It was at this point, at the end of September, just under 8 Bitcoin. And this, of course, is a very similar model to that adopted by Argo blockchain, except that, of course, Argo were investing directly into the facilities. So there was an awful lot more expenditure and base costs behind the operation. So I think Vinanz actually have a really good model in this regard. Also, the company said at that point that Block Labs, who it employs to source the mining, Block Labs are doing a great job, and they intended to expand operations. Then, of course, yesterday, which drove a big jump in the share price, which I'll come to in a second. Yesterday, the company announced it raised £350,000 at 3p, so that put a floor under the share price, because previously the share price had closed at 2.8p, so it's a 4.3% premium to that closing price, and it had used that money to acquire further 250 Bitcoin miners and effectively at a stroke triple its North American mining fleet. Processing rate is going to jump from 12 petahash to 38 petahash, triple the power. And what that will mean for Vinanz, it will generate a new Bitcoin into the wallet every 10 days. So this is the company's got a really good structure here to be able to generate Bitcoin, which is currently trading. I'm looking here, just under £30,000 a coin. So if that jumps to £50,000 a coin, then we're going to really start seeing some progress by the group. Just a note on the board again. I mentioned David Lennegas. Of course, David is the director, and David's background is mining. He has a BSc from Kalgoorlie School of Mining in Australia. Holds a first-class mine manager certificate there as well, and he served as an executive chairman and NEDs on many public listed companies. He was also key in developing a company called Rare Earth Minerals, which later evolved into Cadence Minerals PLC. So has a very close connection. Of course, as you know, we work closely with Kiran Mazzari and the team at Cadence that are onto some very exciting developments with the Amapa Iron Ore project and their other investments. And he played a significant part or role in developing the Sonora lithium project in Mexico and the Sinovac lithium project in Prague, which is now really starting to get to the point where the lithium carbon has been tested, and it's it's battery fit for the EU EV manufacturing hub. So David's played a key role in that regard. So Jeremy Edelman is also a director. He's worked for some of the world's leading investment banks and is also chairman of AIM-listed Rebold Resources PLC. Mahesh Pralandran also on the team as well. Mahesh has worked with Deloitte previously, Coutts & Co, and he now leads Corporate Asia Advisory group in Asia, and is the regional head in Singapore. And Mahesh, of course, is also on the board of VVV Resources that we discussed recently, Mark, working with exec chairman Jim Williams there to develop the interest in the Austria copper fields. So a good team in place there. Just a word on the Vinanz share price. Of course, the share price was trading at just under 3p, as I said yesterday. On the news yesterday, it jumped from 3p to 6.25p, which you could argue is still, well, it's probably even more fundamentally undervalued now than it was before the announcement yesterday, because the shares were trading at 2.8p prior to the announcement. That's with a generation rate of 12 petahash per second. We're now at 38 petahash, so it's trebled, but the share price has really only doubled. So I would expect to see further movement in the coming days. But with the market capitalization of 7.2 million, if you look back to the last Bitcoin run, we saw Argo blockchain at one point with a valuation of some 1.5 billion. So it gives you an idea of the sort of potential, and if there is another run in Bitcoin, Vinanz is in pole position to benefit from that. Added to which, it doesn't have the operating cost that the companies in the previous generation of Bitcoin miners had. So there we go.
There we go, indeed. Well, thank you, Alan. It is pleasing to see they got that placing away. We know the markets are a little bit tough. So considering as well, perhaps the sentiment has come off, certainly generally, but also perhaps in crypto as well. The fact that, this is the time you want to be sort of speculating, isn't it, to accumulate. This is the time where you want to be taking on those risks. So it's good that placing was indeed got away. David has indeed done what he says he wants to do, and he wants these miners in before Christmas and spinning before Christmas. He seems to be doing what he says. So thank you very much for giving us your take on the investment case. And I think there's still a fair bit more to come from Vinanz. And of course, a lot of the upside is sort of in that Bitcoin price, isn't it? And the halving coming up.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth noting that Bitcoin, or Vinanz rather, has of course a fantastic episode BTC on the Access Market.
Indeed, yeah, so they've got the ticker BTC.
So it's the best ticker. So if you search for BTC, and that's the other thing, in this search world that we live in today, you can type in BTC, and obviously Bitcoin will come up, but also Vinanz will come up as well.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you very much, Alan, again for your time today, and we'll catch you again next week.
Thank you, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.